I thought I would tell you a little about me and why it was that I decided to do this warrior education work and how it got started. I thought I would start with a story about when I realized that this was a direction I needed to go. I was sitting on a mountain at a mother's retreat. We had gotten up early for an early morning hike, and they told us to take our journals up there and some questions, and we just had some beautiful presentations, and I was really thinking about my purpose and what I needed to do to move forward and to really nurture and give my kids what they needed. And so I was sitting up there and I was thinking about how I had been spending quite a bit of time, well, I mean, not a ton, but I'd spending time blogging. And it started when I was trying to keep in touch with my family, and so I would write about what we were doing, the kids and things. But it started to evolve into writing my thoughts as people would ask questions about things. I started writing my thoughts about parenting and motherhood. And as I was sitting up on this mountain, I thought, I probably should stop blogging so much because it's taking time away from my kids. So I was praying about just giving that up and what Heavenly Father would have me do. And as I told him I was prepared to give that up, I had several thoughts flash into my mind. One of them was the questions and the comments I had had from people who told them how much my words had helped them and blessed their lives in some way. And then I kind of had this flashback to when I was in third grade and I was on some monkey bars with some friends, well, with my best friend, actually, just her. And she was telling me that they were getting ready to go after school to see a child psychologist because her parents were getting divorced and they were trying to figure out how to cope with it, and that he was helping them feel better. And I remember that day thinking, I want to do something like that. I want to be a child psychologist or someone that can help families when they're struggling. And that never really left me. That was kind of what, whenever anyone would say, what do you want to do when you grow up? Oh, I want to be a psychologist, I just had that in my mind. And it was really about strengthening families. That's what I wanted to do. And then I also had a flashback of when I first became a mother and how hard it was for me. I had grown up, we moved to America when I was 7. I was born in Mexico, and my parents worked really hard. They had to start over, they didn't know the language, and they just taught us a lot about what it means to love and to work hard for those you love. They wanted to make our life a lot better than theirs was. And so I feel like I guess I was a little spoiled growing up in a way because they didn't want me to have to face some of those hard things. And I got a lot of my own way. I was the only girl, I was the oldest. So becoming a mother was a huge transition for me. I wasn't used to sacrificing and thinking about someone else quite so much. So I really struggled, and I remember when my little girl would wake up at night, I would just cry with her because I just thought, there's no way people do this all the time. They wake up in the middle of the night and have to take care of someone else, and I'm so tired, and is this the life I've chosen, and I'd be so tired the next day, and I'd have to do dishes, and I remember just looking at the stack of dishes thinking, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I have to wash dishes day after day and clean up messes, and everything's so temporary. I change her diaper, she poops again, I feed her, she's always hungry, and then I wash these dishes, and then I do the laundry, and they're always dirty again, and I just felt like I was wasting time away. But little by little, as I pushed forward and learned to serve, and my love grew and my capacity for love grew and my perspective was enlarged, and I realized that nothing I did was temporary. A character is eternal, and every time I washed dishes I built my character, especially when I didn't feel like it and I didn't want to, and I made myself do it anyway. I thought about these experiences and how I'd grown, and how at the time I had decided that I could maybe have 2 children. I thought, I'm at my limit with 1, but I don't know if I want her to be an only child. So after several years I may be able to handle 2, but this is way more than I realized it would be. And I thought back on that because at the time when I was sitting up on this mountain, I had either 4 or 5 kids at the time. And I loved it, and I realized how much I had grown and how my experiences could help others. The other experience that flashed into my head was when my little girl was, 6 months or so, and we were sitting outside our porch in Kentucky, and she was looking up at the leaves that helped calm her down, and she was on her little bouncer, and I was sitting there, and I was looking up at the leaves on the tree as well. And I was thinking about the show I had seen the night before. It was called Friends, and I just remember thinking about how that lifestyle was becoming and looking very normal to me. And I remember thinking, I don't want my daughter to think that that sort of lifestyle is normal or good. And I decided at that time that I would stop watching shows that portrayed things that I didn't want to invite in our home. And I realized, when I would settle her down at night and I would sit down to watch TV, that most shows weren't up to that standard. And so the next day, after I kind of came to that conclusion, I went to the library. I knew, my education isn't very good, and my little girl needs someone that knows, some history and some a lot more than I know. And so I thought, I'll start reading the classics. That should help me be educated. And I was walking down the aisles with my stroller, looking at all the titles, trying to figure out if one of them looked like a classic, if any of them sounded familiar. And I came across Charles Dickens, and I remember thinking, oh, I think he's a classic author. I've heard of him before. So I pulled one of the books off the shelf, and I went to the librarian, and I just asked her, is this a good classic? And she said, oh, well, Charles Dickens is a great read. What are you looking for? And I said, I don't know, just a good classic to start reading. I realized I don't have a very good education, and I want to start getting one. And she said, oh, well, this is probably not the best one to start with. I had Pickwick Papers, and she said, but you would probably love this one. So she put that one back on the shelf, and she handed me David Copperfield, and I went home and read it. At first it was hard, right? Like I didn't understand the language, but I kind of pushed through because I really wanted to be smart. And I started to understand more and more. By the time I finished, I realized how much I had been missing by not having read more of these things. The depth of thought and the way it opened up my mind was incredible. And I wanted more of it. It started making me more thirsty for more. And I think part of it too was that I had read in school a few things, but it was to pass a test and to get a good grade. I had never really read with this intent that I had now, to better myself and to be a better mother. And so that's how I started reading books, and I just kept going back to the library, and it was hit and miss. Some books were like, why in the world is this a classic? I didn't get it, but a lot were really good. And I always read them with this intent of what does this teach me about life and being a better person? And I picked up on more and more things. Eventually, when my husband decided to go back to school to get his master's degree, I also decided to finish my degree. Just taking school part-time. I was almost finished when we got married. And so I got my degree in marriage, family, and human development a little after my fourth baby was born. And again, I went to school with this new intent of how do I apply this to my life? How do I apply this to my family? And so everything was just exciting and new and interesting. And it was a new way of learning that I enjoyed, and I kept reading, and as my kids got older, I started reading them classics and picking up more and more things. And that is how I started getting these parenting ideas and principles that I learned to share with others and in my blog posts and in the things I taught. I now have 8 incredible children. I started homeschooling when my oldest was going into 3rd grade, so I've been able to learn a lot from that about education. And so as all of these thoughts flashed in my mind, I thought, wait a minute, is writing one of my gifts? I had never considered to be so. I realized I was a really bad writer when I was in high school. I remember taking a creative writing class, and our teacher had us do this paper about the story that we had come up with that morning. I couldn't do it. I just froze, and I didn't go to class the next day because I could not think of a story. And I realized at that point, like, writing is just something I'm terrible at. I cannot write. And so I just always considered myself to be a bad writer. But when I was feeling this prompting and these thoughts about writing and continuing to write and continuing to share a message, it kind of made me question that idea that I had, that I was bad at it, and maybe it was something I was meant to do. Even if I wasn't great at it, it was something I needed to develop. And so that's kind of how it got started. From then on, I continued to write and share thoughts and answer questions that people had. I did that for a good 10 years before, maybe 10 to 12, I'm not exactly sure on the dates. And then this idea to start this website came to my mind. It was a little after my oldest daughter decided to go serve a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I remember, missing her a lot and just thinking about how I wanted to do something to also bless the world like she was doing. And this idea just started to come to me every time I'd go on my morning hikes. I kept thinking more and more thoughts about what I needed to do and how I needed to build it. I would write blog posts, which eventually one led to the other, and then that turned into a book, and then that turned into a program as I realized that more additional support was needed. And I was inspired to take this class at church called Growing Your Business, and I wasn't interested in doing a business, but I really was interested in sharing a message and growing it. I wanted more people to be able to find my website if they needed it, and to be able to go through those steps. And so in this class they taught us that a hobby is different than a business, in that a hobby is something that you put a lot of time and effort into and you get a lot of joy out of. But business is something that you put time and effort into, and it grows, and it's kind of its own entity that can have an output and grow itself, and that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to share and grow this message. And so I started learning more about that, and that's how Warrior Education LLC got started, in just my attempt to have that come to be, to have it be its own entity and grow itself and share the message with more people. So that's kind of my story, how this all came about. And I came back down off the mountain that morning with a new perspective and a new understanding of who I was and where I needed to be. So I just love that pattern that we can all use in our lives, that ability to discover little by little, experience by experience, the work we are here to do, like that song by David Archuleta, where he says, just keep listening and pretty soon you'll start to figure out your part. And I think that's kind of what we do, and what I hope to teach and continue to do myself. So if you're interested in learning more, I created this tiered system to give you access to whatever it is that you feel you need. I have some free resources, and to whatever level you're at. And then there's the book and the journals, and then there's also the self-paced program, and then the more mentored program where you want more personal mentoring for you and your family in a group way, where we move through the program together and work on the same things and share with one another, so that you have the group support. So I outline what those are below, and you can kind of look through them and see what it is that might be helpful to you, if it's something that would interest you. So thanks for taking the time to listen to my story, and I am really excited for you and your journey and the things that are ahead. I hope these things are helpful to you, and bless your family.